Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, gamer boys and girls, welcome back to the pod. So we are in the last month of summer, and probably most of you have already been on holiday. If not, well, use these next couple of weeks, I know I will. As usual, we have put 3 hours into each game, or more if it was needed for this bundle, so we can really aid you in choosing your games. So let's not waste any time, and let's dive into this month's bundle.
Probably one of the worst gaming titles I've ever come across, which there's absolutely no way makes sense to anyone who has no idea of the background story. Even knowing the reason behind it, that the game is actually about traveling as far as the eye, a mysterious location, I can't fathom how no one stopped this marketing catastrophe from happening. However, with that out of my system, I'm happy to let you know outofspace is a strong contender to being the actual best title of this month's package. Calling it a hidden gem is certainly no exaggeration. The fantasy of the game is centered around a tribe of, from what I understood, spirits having to reach this location called the Eye to safely cross over to a new world before the one they inhabit gets completely flooded. You'll aid them in doing so through picking a route for them to take towards the Eye, and by supervising them, gathering the necessary resources for the journey. Latter will be done on a hex-based map where almost every tile will be populated by a certain resource, such as fruits, ore, wood and many more, or if not any of these, then features such as mountains, ponds, marshes, runes and others. Seriously, just this variety alone is impressive. First, you want to explore the randomly generated playfield you're currently on and select a camping spot for your caravan. You'll then review what resources are available to harvest and based on that, open up the map to determine the next route you'll take. Every route will require different resources. Maybe you'll have to repair a bridge and you'll need an abundance of wood, or mayhaps you'll have to cross snowy peaks, so you'll have to gather a lot of wool to keep warm. Once you've made your choice, you have to manage your little tribe in their collecting effort, assigning tasks to them one by one, making sure none of them are wasting their time. As the turns go by, the dreaded flood draws closer and closer, as indicated in the bottom area of the screen, and you most certainly don't want to wait for that to happen. Not only that, but as it draws closer, unfortunate events seem to become more and more frequent, such as vision-limiting fogs, mosquitoes carrying illnesses, or agitated termites raiding your buildings. In case this wasn't already enough to keep you busy, you'd better keep in mind which of your tribesmen you assign to which task, as while carrying those out, they'll gain experience that can turn into talent points, making specializing the preference over just randomly tasking them with jobs. Once you've gathered the required resources, you can move on to the next part of your journey, or if you have time left, you might want to stay a while to gain additional experience. Before eventually leaving, a Tetris-like minigame will greet you as you decide which of the resources you'll take with you. Whatever you can fit in the available space comes, everything else stays. Just keep in mind when you're staying longer than necessary for the sake of the precious XP points, nature doesn't appreciate waste. The more resources you've harvested and left behind, the more frequent the occurrence of disasters later on. Pair this insane complexity with the simplistic but beautiful visuals, the charming background music and good sound work, add to this the replayability offered by the random nature, and voila, you've got a great game on your hands. You'll probably adore it just as much as I did, as long as you're the patient type who doesn't necessarily mind attempting to think ahead while keeping in mind RNGesus can swoop in and take a big fat crap all over your plans any minute.
Carto is a charming little adventure game wrapped around one, but albeit unique, world-altering puzzle mechanic. The story is about Carto, a little girl who got separated from her grandmother during a storm and lands on a foreign land. However, she slowly discovers that she can move the lands on her map, and with the new pieces of the game map she finds, she starts to shape the land to get back to her grandmother. Carto is great. I have to say this in the beginning. Not perfect, far from it, but it is great. It has everything that a game should have, and I quite like the map shifting mechanic. And this mechanic by itself is a true testament why I like indie games nowadays better than AAA titles. It is fresh, new and simple. The gameplay is all about you wandering and solving puzzles and talking to the inhabitants of the islands. There is no voice acting, the characters are talking to each other via text bubbles. As mentioned, you take on the role of Carto, a young girl who has been separated from her grandmother and must travel to many exotic locations, meeting many different cultures to reunite. The central gameplay gimmick is that the world you explore can be changed by rearranging your map. You basically place tiles Carcassonne style, meaning you can place map tiles so long as the edges of the tile match the edge of the tile you place it next to, and then explore what you just connected. With this mechanic you can shift yourself to places and solve puzzles. The character writing is strong, with each of the people you meet having fun personalities. The whole game is so charming. The hand-drawn graphics and paper-like characters are really nice. Maybe because I'm getting old and these remind me of my childhood, but I liked it nevertheless. The game is quite short, but is perfectly paced. I beat it around 3.5 hours, but I had fun throughout the game. For me, the game wasn't hard, and I could easily solve every puzzle. But I don't think I'm the intended audience for this game. If I were a child and I would be playing this, I am absolutely sure that this would be a fantastic and magical journey. So if you have a child, or you just want to embark on a short but great adventure, this game is for you.
Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night is a Metroidvania, apparently one of the main titles of this month's bundle, and I'll let you in on a little secret. I hate almost everything about this fucking game. Let's start off with the graphics. Obviously subject to one's taste, but the 2.5D models already put me off, and further to this, a large part of the world just looks oozy, like it's covered completely in lube. I also failed to appreciate how only the weapon in your hand and the helmet you wear changes based on the equipped item. Your choice of armor doesn't seem to be reflected on your character, I assume for the sake of showing more skin. Sound effects and music are okay, just don't expect anything outstanding really. As for gameplay, the exploration part is fun, just like in any other title. Discovering new areas and adding them to your minimap fills you with a sense of accomplishment, especially when you manage to find hidden areas. I'm not a fan of the respawn rate of enemies, but luckily once you discover teleportation rooms you'll be able to skip previous areas, saving you a shitload of legwork and combat. And is that a good thing? Oh boy. Combat in Bloodstained is freaking horrendous. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Enemies are either weird or just plain stupid, I'm not sure, but they just love to walk at you instead of attacking, rather damaging you by rubbing their hitboxes against yours. Jesus Christ, how this annoyed the hell out of me. On other occasions, they would just refuse to admit your existence, right until you cross a certain pixel, resulting in cheesy situations of you beating the crap out of their bodies, while they would just stand there, watching. Latter, however, is probably the preferred outcome. The less you have to engage with the combat system, the better. Your moveset consists of attacking, casting spells, jumping, ducking, and backdashing. Out of these, the attacks are at least somewhat interesting. Based on the equipped weapon, you'd have different patterns and flow of combat, even special moves you could perform. Spells? Well, I have no fucking idea. 3 hours of playtime wasn't enough for me to figure out how to change my equipped spell, so I just used the base fireball, which proved useful but not even remotely satisfying. And as for the backdash, Sweet Mary and Joseph, I get that you're trying to pay homage to Castlevania, but it's just a garbage move that only works in one direction, and even then, it's not even good enough to dodge every single move in the game. why not implement a proper directional dash and make the game more enjoyable? Add to this how there are absolutely no health bars or visual damage indications on enemies, and what you get are boss fights that feel tedious as all hell. The run-of-the-mill story of demons breaking loose and you having to save the world from your old friend turned evil didn't exactly get me roped in either, but to at least say something nice, I did appreciate how you can customize the size and opacity of your minimap. That's actually a really neat touch. I'm not gonna go on ranting any longer on this title. Bloodstained, in my eyes, is completely unenjoyable. I'll definitely not go back for a single second. However, to be completely fair, I have to add, fans of the genre seem to love it to bits, so maybe if you're also a Metroidvania fanboy or fangirl, you should check it out and, I don't know, prove me wrong.
Lastoasis. I borderline hate when Humble drops in early access games into the pool. 88% of the time it is a dead-ass game with no player base, with no actual development behind it. Lastoasis is somewhat in this group as well. First of all, this is a survival MMO, which means hours of grinding and a lot of time to be dedicated. And as the name states, it should be played by a massive player base. And well, I haven't seen much of that. Okay, so what's the story? What is the world like, you may ask? Well, gather around, children, and let me tell you the story how the world stopped spinning and how the sun scorched the earth until only sand remained. So after a cataclysmic event halted the Earth's rotation, the planet was split into two extreme and deadly environments. Only a narrow region between the burning and the freezing halves of the planet can support life. This region moves as the planet orbits around the sun, and all living creatures must migrate with it to survive. In order to keep moving, the remnants of humanity have built nomadic machines and walking cities called the flotilla. And this is where the player joins. You, the newbie, you have to survive and build yourself a walker. So the story is quite interesting and the world feels original, a big-ass wasteland and sand everywhere. During my first try I messed up so quickly I had to restart everything, but before I played again, I watched some videos and read some about the game, as the tutorial is everything but helpful. But after I acquired all the knowledge, I needed to start gathering and crafting, and fighting. And after a couple of hours I've even had my own vehicle. And I somewhat like what I saw, but this doesn't mean it is actually a game you should play. This game is early access, and it is in development. As it turned out, I have started playing the last day of the season, and everything I earned got wiped the next day I logged in. And I was fucking furious. But that isn't the reason I don't like the game. The reasons are the following. It is buggy as hell. They aren't game breaking by any means, but there is a lot of them and it makes traversing pretty irritating at times, or pretty easy at times. Sometimes you get hurt because of falling, sometimes you don't. Sometimes hits register, sometimes not. Secondly, the game is severely dead. I've joined the most populated server with 47 people and I've only seen one guy F-king during my entire time with this game and around 6 all chat messages. Thirdly, if you are a new player, you will have a bad time. And the first couple of hours, all you will do is gathering resources while browsing the wiki page just to find your way. So there are problems quite a lot with this. But I don't mean this review to be a shit show, so I have to be just and mention the good things as well. Building and driving around in these walkers in a desert wasteland is a rather great time. Everything to unlock within the game is spread between multiple trees, vitamins, crafting, equipment, construction, walkers, each having a vast amount of things to unlock within them. The lore is great, and the world building is quite nice as well. But this is all that is to the positive side of the game. Overall, do not pick this one, only if you have friends to play with, and you don't mind if your progress is getting wiped every so often.
Bluefire is a 3D action game. I realize this is probably the most meaningless category ever created, but to be perfectly honest, I'm struggling to specify it any further, and I do have a sneaking feeling that the developers would as well. Reality is, Bluefire seems to want to be Zelda, sending you out on a quest to save the world, delving temples, collecting tools to tackle new challenges, and for Pete's sake, just look at this game. However, Bluefire also wants to be Prince of Persia, placing a heavy emphasis on platforming, especially at times when it decides to evoke the feeling of spectacle fighters as well, by pitting you against challenge rooms for upgrades. Last but not least, if this wasn't enough already, it also wants to be a part of the Soul series by implementing a lighter version of those titles' combat system. In the end, Bluefire is all of the above, and none of them really, being left behind with a sad lack of self-identity. Core gameplay loop sees you controlling Grim, from the grim stories of Bill and Mandy, through a mediocre story of light and shadow, of you being the only hope, gods dying, yada 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 yada. Alternatively, if you don't like Grim, you later get to turn him into Link, or follow my advice and play as Kenny. You'll have to explore the world around you in a sort of Metroidvania fashion, looking to complete main and side quests given to you by various NPCs. Unfortunately, unlike in any good Metroidvania title, there's absolutely no map here, which is a mind-boggling oversight from the developers. While being busy with all this discovery, you'll come across various combat or platforming sections. Combat is fairly okay, you have your basic attacks, 3 of them combo into a chain, you can cast spells as long as you have mana available, you can cast a shield, which if timed right parries incoming attacks, and your dash serves as a dodge move. Honestly, nothing outstanding to see here, other than the responsiveness of the controls, which I think outclasses any other I've come across so far. And this also comes across during the platforming sections, which can be somewhat challenging while out and about in the world, but then become absolutely brutal when entering the challenge rooms. These you'll find frequently during your journey, and they take you to a separate mini-level and task you with going through an obstacle course while collecting a number of these shiny little whatever orbs. If you succeed, you're rewarded with a shiny new hit point. Personally, these are the parts of Bluefire I spent most of my time with, and if you're similarly a sucker for the pain and frustration caused by trying to learn a difficult platforming section and then finally pulling them off, well, you'll have a whale of a time in these rooms as well. If you're looking for a boss fighter, however, I don't really have good news for you. The only fight I came across was quite mediocre. In the end, I actually just ended up brute forcing it, but that of course doesn't mean later on they won't get better, who knows. All of that being said, Bluefire suffers from a serious personality disorder, trying to be everything all at once, but not really being anything specific as a result. This shouldn't dissuade you, however. I'd advise you actually give it a chance, at the very least to experience the fluent controls and the fun challenge rooms.
Out of space. I truly hate talking shit about games, and I'm always trying to find some of the good qualities it has. There are 2 games in this bundle I wanted to initially give a big fat 0, but both of them came out to the light in the last minute. Out of Space is one of them. So the whole game is about cleaning and getting your spaceship into shape. You have to mop alien goo, recycle the aliens, water your plants, eat, sleep and play some furniture, all the while you are trying to fend off the aliens. This for me seemed very shallow for a core gameplay, but nevertheless I jumped in open-minded, as I played similar games in the past, like Overcooked, where the gameplay is all about cooking and, well, that's it. So after I finished the tutorial, I clicked on play, just so I could try to join into an online lobby for some fun. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me show you how my first couple of hours with this game looked like. So this is what happens when, according to astronomy, you wish upon a star. That star is most likely 3 billion years old and is dead, just like this game's player base. I have waited a lot, lost hours of my life so I can show you what it's like to play this game as it was intended to be played. Well, actually I can. I could salvage one actual game where I'm playing with a random somebody who joined into my game. Dear player, who joined into the game and played with me. If you ever see this video, props to you. You salvaged this part of the video. Thanks to you I can actually say and show something about it. So we have started playing, we cleaned, we put furniture down, we fought aliens. But as the game progressed, the whole gameplay felt a bit like a knockoff version of Overcooked. It can be fun with a friend, but for me it felt very clunky and insanely slow. We played on the smallest map, and while I was thankful that I could finally play, I couldn't shake the feeling that if the smallest map takes this long, what about the medium and the large sized maps? Walking is way too slow as well, although me and the buddy of mine worked really well together and could win the map, after I realized I wasn't having fun at all. Maybe because I've already wasted more than enough time just by waiting, but more likely because the game isn't funny or exciting and overall just misses the mark. And the dead online player base just adds to this. All in all, it is a hard pass from my side, and I won't suggest picking it.
Holy smokes, have I dreaded the second I'd have to start testing another early access title. Was I right though? Well, I'm not entirely sure. Is it incomplete? Absolutely. Cepheus Protocol is supposed to have 4 game modes, plus a mod scene. Currently, it only has 2 of those available to play, and even one of those openly admits it has optimization issues, so you might be better off playing the toned down version. It's also lacking a proper tutorial. The one it currently has is a mix of videos and slides, containing occasional out-of-date information, but at least it gives you a general idea. It also has heavy pathing issues. I repeatedly had to navigate units all the way from one side of the map to the other, otherwise they would just get stuck in the middle of absolutely nothing, having not the slightest clue whatever the hell is going on. There's also the occasional stutter, which I would assume on lower or even mid-tier rigs maybe, would be much more noticeable. I also think the game would need a way to toggle speed, not only lower, which it currently does, but higher as well, but maybe that's something that will come later down the pipeline, well, hell if I know. Despite all of these issues, however, I decided I'm actually not gonna bash Cepheus, as it clearly is an unfinished title, and it doesn't even remotely claim to be anything else. Instead, the developers actually seem to be using early access as it was intended, listening to player feedback, delivering regular updates, and clear comms of actually what's going on back there. That being said, I still don't recommend picking this title up, as I wouldn't for almost any early access game, but let's at least take a quick glance at what it does have on offer currently. There are currently 2 playable game modes in this real-time strategy title, Pandemic and Horde. Pandemic places you on an island being infested by zombies, and your task is to build up a base, expand your influence and hunt down Patient Zero, who apparently is the mother of all zombies. I'm happy to admit I actually enjoyed discovering the game's mechanics, building up defenses, going out to hunt down and push back the zombies, right up to the point where they started showing up in my backline, despite me actually holding both choke points with armed forces. I'm not sure if zombies can actually swim in this title, and thus they just sneakily ambushed me or whatever the hell happened, but that's the point I got annoyed and just pushed out with all my forces into certain death. Horde mode, on the other hand, has more of a tower defense feel to it. You're stuck trying to hold a shipyard from endless waves of zombies. And just like Pandemic, I enjoyed the beginning of this mode as well. It was fun to build up a base under pressure of constant attacks, getting the resources from kills and as a reward of completing waves, and then spending these resources on slow but steady progress. Admittedly, however, it did become stale after around, I would say round 8 or so, when I had my base setup complete and, well, nothing really threatened me despite bigger and meaner creatures showing up on my doorstep. So what's my conclusion after all this rambling, you might ask? Well, first of all, Humble has to stop including fucking unfinished games in their bundles. Second, Cepheus is incomplete, a lot more work has to be done before it even resembles a polished game, but truth be told, unlike Hammerting from last month, this time I'm somewhat curious to return once the actual release comes around the corner. This might actually end up being something good.
Nowhereprophet. Nowhereprophet is a deck builder roguelike. It is presented as a hybrid game. Its combat system is made through cards that we drew from a deck, yes, but because of how the adventure is structured, it is easier to relate it to a tactical roguelike. One that draws its influences from a role-playing board game, that shows us its words through boards, squares, and decisions made from events read in texts. As prophets of this world, we will lead a caravan of believers who will follow in our footsteps, fight with us, rest with us, and eventually die for us and our cause. The individuals that make up our ranks are represented as cards that are added to our deck. And these are the cards that we use to fight in the many confrontations that will be proposed to us on the game board. Nowhereprophet's main experience is in its campaign mode. We start with a small group of followers and a leader, we are being the leader of course, and over a couple of runs we will be able to unlock new classes of leaders, and these will change the initial hero and the follower cards that we have at the beginning of the game. The most basic hero has abilities to improve follower statistics or damage the enemy, but the more advanced ones will affect more complex tactics such as playing with the environment or by repositioning pieces of the stage. As per the usual deck builder roguelikes, Nowhereprophet does the basics the same as everyone. We move our heroes through the board formed by a layout of boxes that branch off into alternative routes of different risks and possibilities, but there's a catch. Each step will waste resources, namely hope and food in this case, so we have to take safe steps and be focused on achievable short-term goals. On our way we will come across dungeons, shelters, mills, confrontation, different storylines, etc. Each one carries its risks and presents obvious benefits that we can take advantage of. The game is full of random events that bring a lot of life to the moment by moment of the campaign and give it an unpredictable value. When we move between squares, we can bump into events related to individuals in the world or individuals in our following. These events also have the advantage of being able to be solved in different ways according to different factors. For example, if we have a large number of cards, we can intimidate the rival. If our altruistic statistic is very high, we can unlock options to do things for others more easily. Sometimes, if we have a specific card, we can even solve a situation without having risks or sacrifice that card in our place. But when we are not so lucky, it is time to kick some ass. Although there are a couple of mechanics taken from the usual suspects, the truth is that the card combat system is presented in a quite unique format. The first thing to note is that combat takes place in squares just like the game on the board. We place our follower cards in such way that the first of each row is the only one that can attack and be attacked, while those that remain behind are left for cards with passive properties. There are other elements that come into play. Obstacles occupy squares on the game board and work well as hindrance where followers cannot be positioned, or as point of strategic value as they can act as covers as well or have abilities. For example, an obstacle that heals nearby followers when hit, or on the contrary, another that damages them. Leader cards on the other hand have to do with the abilities of our prophet and thrown into the combat as instant effect cards, which can improve the statistics of an ally or damage a specific enemy or hinder them. As we discussed, there are mechanics carried over from other card titles. The energy limits the number of cards that we can play per turn according to their cost. However, the biggest surprise for me was the damage on our follower element, which is completely in line with a good roguelike. Let me elaborate on this. If a follower card is destroyed in combat, it remains injured for future battles, so it is better to take care of them, healing them in a settlement or remove them from the deck so they are not damaged again, because a card with a wound that is destroyed in a combat is a card that we can forget about, and that is forever discarded from our deck, and there is no resurrection here. Every follower card counts, and the game forces us not to lightly deploy followers on the board. For this reason, the confrontations are direct and shorter than is usual in the genre. The game isn't looking for big plays that involve sacrificing pawns or complex long-term strategies, rather the objective is to finish off the rival leader in the fewest possible turns, and taking as little damage as possible along the way. Our Prophet, beyond being an avatar that represents us in combat, has room for growth as well. We can equip weapons or equipment cards that raise our statistics and add new mechanics to combat, such as the possibility of gaining armor if a follower dies, or launching an attack once per combat that damages a row of enemies. By winning battles we will gain experience to level up, and with each level we can unlock a new leader card, which is added to our deck and that we can cast in combat as a kind of an instant spell. It is the most role-playing part of the title that is organically integrated into the card combat. Overall, if you are a lover of card games or role-playing, you might want to pick this one. For me, this was one of the 2 games I actually enjoyed a lot.
Drakehollow is a cute but heartbreaking addition to the adventure genre, spiced with survival and base building elements. After customizing your nameless protagonists to your heart's content, you'll soon learn they suffer from a broken heart. But hey, no worries. As soon as a weird crow with demonic glowing green eyes shows up, you'll be more than happy to jump into a trans-dimensional portal to find better things in life, I guess. Once you reach the other side, you'll slowly unravel the story of this world that was once the happy home to carrots, turnips, and all sorts of other veggies, or as this game refers to them, drakes. Unfortunately, this world has been raided by shadowy creatures, and in the process, the drakes have lost all their power. Fret not, however. If you save the lost ones, and nurture them all back to their former state, they'll be happy to teleport you right back home to your depressing life. To reach this end, you'll be looking to do the following. You'll travel through the mist to other islands to loot whatever resources you can find there. These will come in the form of either natural resources, such as trees and plants that you can chop down, or these will be leftovers from the previous denizens, such as juice boxes, duct tape, nails, and so on. While you're at it, if you thoroughly search the islands, you'll also find little notes left behind that will shed light on the events that took place. Furthermore, you'll also beat up the shadowy creatures on these islands and cleanse their infestation by beating the crap out of the fawns all over the place. Sadly, even though you'll have an abundance of fun weapons to pick up and use, actually too much even if you ask me, combat is one of the main areas Drakehollow fails at. Even though you have a full set of light and heavy attacks, combos, dodge and block, none of these can be move cancelled, resulting in a sluggish experience where you wait for the enemy to do their thing, then it's your turn, you do your thing, them again, and so on and so forth. It's not horrendous at all, it's just slow and repetitive. Which, by the way, are also the keywords when it comes to the island exploration part, partly because that also inevitably features combat, but also because of the distances you'll have to cover. And of course, because visiting the next island and collecting all the garbage there, then doing this same thing again and again is practically just repetitive by nature. What keeps this aspect somewhat enjoyable though, is the appealing art style and the feeling of attention to detail the islands emit. The abandoned lighthouse or the factory in the distance, they just call for you to go over and explore them. Luckily you can return to camp in a heartbeat by using an item you can craft, and later on you'll also have access to a sort of fast travel railway you can use to get from A to B faster. I just wish this waypoint system was implemented in a more reasonable way. Instead of having to tediously place 4 to connect 2 islands, they could have just made it so that one would cost more but cover a bigger area. You could just place them in the center of each island and voila, everyone's way happier. Speaking of quality of life, it would have also been nice if you didn't have to pick shit up from the ground by clicking or holding down a button, but just by walking over them. I'm pretty sure no one would be complaining about that either. Last but not least, the whole reason you're collecting all this junk is the base building aspect. Using the resources you collect, you'll build a new home for your turnip collection, and you'll tend to their needs of food, water, rest and entertainment. You'll start out small, having access to makeshift furniture only, but as you gather and level up more and more rootlings, you'll unlock access to better stuff and automatization. All that being said, Drakehollow isn't a bad game at all. While it didn't make me lose my mind, and it likely won't have any such effect on other regular gamer guys and gals either, that's purely on the back of its slow nature. If you don't mind the tempo, there's a good chance you'll actually find DH a good game. Also, I'll have to keep this game in the back of my head, as its charming atmosphere and simple gameplay makes it a prime suspect to bring out should one day little bunnies show interest in the gaming hobby.
Superliminal. The puzzle game genre is a tad bit underrated. There are many of them, but not too many are remembered, and less come to mind when we mention puzzle games. So let's see if Superliminal is as good as Portal or The Witness. So this game is a first-person puzzle game where perception is reality. But what does this mean? Basically, what we see is the real thing, regardless if it makes sense from a physical point of view. The concept can be difficult to explain, which hints at the originality of the concept. So think of the photos in which someone seems to be holding the Tower of Pisa, or holding the sun between their hands. A real example to give you an idea is to take a small wedge of cheese and turn it into a ramp several meters high, just like this. Some puzzles are great, but others are not so much. My main problem is that sometimes you just have to find which object you should interact with, and then everything is quite simple afterwards. I know, when developing puzzle games it is a very complex work to design puzzles. And that's why the game doesn't allow us to interact with every element. But when there are only a couple of things that I can use, the game inevitably gives me a clue as to what I have to do. Just like the cheese in my previous example. If that's the only item, I will know what to do instantly. It might seem like that this isn't a great game, but quite the contrary. I had a great time with it. Every time the game surprised me, I was letting out of sounds of excitement and surprise. I always appreciate having something in my hands that tries something different. And even if it's not perfect, this game has great moments, and some of the puzzles are just jaw-dropping. But just like any puzzle game, of course, it depends a lot on the player. If you can see the beauty of these mind-bending puzzles, you will like this one. The story of Superliminal, as the name suggests, is to explore the supraliminal while we sleep. That is, to explore what we could achieve if during our dreams we were above the threshold of consciousness. That's why the whole world feels like a very old yet curious dream. It is a great story, organized in a similar way that's seen in Portal, where we are the subject of an experiment and several voices guide us through the tests and the narrative. And there is no denying of the fact that this game was inspired by Portal, but it isn't a problem, as it isn't a Portal clone. Regarding the music and the sounds in this game, the music is quite relaxing. It is what you would listen to in a hotel lobby. The sounds of the items are mediocre at best, but hey, the Stanley Parable had almost no sounds in it, so it isn't a problem. Superliminal is one of those puzzle games that will pop into my head whenever I will talk about puzzle games in the future. The core idea is simply fantastic, and the creativity the devs had when working on this is nothing short of amazing. So, if you like puzzle games, you have to give this a try, and let your dreams guide you through it.
Encodya tells the story of Tina, an orphan street kid, and her dedicated bodyguard robot Sam, through a point-and-click adventure game successfully funded via Kickstarter. The story is set in the future city of Neo-Berlin, where corporations have way too much power in their hands, robots are as abundant as humans, and the mayor is the object of most everyone's hatred. Supporting music is nice, sound work is great, and while I wouldn't say I'm in love with the looks of every single character, overall visuals also deserve an A+. As for gameplay, you can expect the usual point-and-click content, the good and the bad as well. This includes closely inspecting levels for items and objects that you can interact with, collecting everything possible, combining them if needed, and feeling smart that you figured out how to get past the puzzles the game throws at you. At the same time, as usual, you will come across cases where you have a solution that seems to make sense, but that's just not the solution intended, so you have to keep looking. For example, and I say this with a minor spoiler warning tagged on, at one point you'll have to electrocute a robot, and even though there's a high voltage line right in front of you that could easily be used to do so, apparently that's not the way to do it. These cases, however, aren't anything to be surprised about if you're familiar with the genre, and I have to say, other than a few select occasions, pixel hunting wasn't especially a thing either. A fun addition Encodya brings to the table is how it plays on the different attributes of the two protagonists. Tina has an easier time convincing other humans to help out, and isn't generally sweaty about breaking the law, while Sam understands everything robot related and also has the physical attributes Tina lacks. A cute example of this was Tina trying to interact with a shop sign, but she couldn't read it as she doesn't speak Japanese. Sam, however, had no trouble translating. This is just how I would imagine these two hanging out during their everydays. Tina being all curious about everything, and Sam rushing to her aid, helping her understand. Another welcome feature was the way they implemented the hint system. Before starting out, you can decide whether you want to play easy or hard mode, and if you go with easy, you get two tools you otherwise wouldn't. 1. You can hit space anytime and objects you could pick up would be highlighted. 2. If you get stuck, selecting Tina you can ask Sam for hints. It's all up to you though. If you never hit space and never ask Sam, you're basically playing hard mode. This might not be an original idea, but I haven't come across this system before, and to be honest I like it. Last but not least, the quality of life implementations, such as double-clicking to run, double-clicking traverse points to instantly move between zones, or the map, are also great additions. You can't go wrong with giving Encodya a shot if you're a fan of the genre, or if you're just looking for a slower game to play. Keep in mind though, you can only get this game on the GOG platform, as for some reason, that's the only option Humble provided, despite Encodya being available on Steam as well.
We need to go deeper. As I have mentioned, there were two games I initially thought they would go down the drain. The first one is Out of Space and We Need to Go Deeper is the other one. Testing this game started out just like the other one. After reading a bit about what to do and when, I was eager to jump in a game, get into a submarine and have some fun with random people. Oh, how naive I was the second time as well. So ladies and gentlemen, let me present you how I have waited for hours in 400% speed. So, that was my first and second try with the game. On the third day, however, just like Jesus, players have emerged from their slumber and I could finally play this game properly. Not just with stupid ass bots, but proper, funny, capable humans. So guys, if you see this, cheers. Thank you for showing me the ropes and what the game could be, if there were people who'd like to play. So let's talk about the game itself. The game is about a submarine and its personnel. The goal is to go as deep as you can while having a great adventure, fights and some truly funny situations. The setup is this. One person drives the submarine, another one shoots, the third loads the torpedoes, the fourth is controlling the energy, so on and so forth. The game is incredibly fast-paced and keeps you on your toes. If there is a hull breach, you have to go and fix it, otherwise you sink. The captain controls the submarine, but something attacks him and he can fight. Well, you better get your ass over there and help him, otherwise you're done for. I'm truly sad that this game has so few people to play with, because I was having a blast playing this. And the people I played with were such nice blokes and girls. They showed me the ropes as soon as I arrived, told me the tactics, and we had a great time, searching for treasure and going as deep as we could. But that's the problem. This miracle occasion happened only once. Never again and not before. I've tried, but I couldn't manage to pull it off another game. Even the people I play with said that it is quite rare to find a lobby that will actually work out. So with all being said, I cannot suggest this one with a good heart. If you have 2, 3, 4 friends who are willing to play with you, it might worth your while. But otherwise, you're better off with other games from this bundle.
Changing pace, instead of last month's heavily average lineup, August brings almost exclusively polarized titles, a boatload of early access and or dead games, paired with another pack of great entries. Based on our experience, top entries of this package were Nowhereprophet, Asfarastheeye, Superliminal, Encodya, Carto and Bluefire. Cepheus, being early access, and Lastoasis, still in alpha, get auto-regulated to the bottom, but they won't feel left alone. Weneedtogodeeper and outofspace follow close behind with their non-existent player base, and Bloodstained as well, for being the pile of garbage it is. Poor drakehollow was so close to being great, it just turned out to be slow and repetitive. Its potential to be a great game for kids still ends at a spot in the middle, however. This sums up to a total of 25 points out of the maximum 36, closing well, let's say interesting month. As always, we'd be very grateful if you please the machine gods by liking our video. If you'd like to come along for next month's ride, don't hesitate to subscribe. Any and all recommendations are welcome in the comment section. Don't forget to spend some time outside, enjoying the summer while it lasts, and we'll see you again next month.